The crystal chandeliers of the Sterling Room cast warm amber light across white tablecloths that cost more than Diane Mitchell's weekly paycheck. She moved through the dining room with practiced invisibility, her black uniform blending into the shadows between tables where conversations worth millions happened over $30 appetizers. Diane had worked at the Sterling Room for 8 years, long enough to perfect the art of being present without being seen, long enough to know which tables left generous tips and which left nothing but crumbs and condescension, long enough to recognize the particular brand of wealthy young men who treated service staff like furniture that occasionally moved. It was 10:47 p.m. on a Thursday in downtown Chicago. The dinner rush had ended an hour ago, leaving only the stragglers, those who lingered over expensive wine, conducting business or romance under the pretense of enjoying cuisine. Diane's feet ached in her regulation black shoes. Her lower back sent sharp reminders that 42 wasn't as forgiving as 25 had been. Table 17 had just cleared. She'd watched the young man sitting there for the past 90 minutes. Mid-20s, designer suit that probably cost more than her car. The kind of confident posture that came from never having to check a price tag. He'd eaten alone, barely touching his $48 steak, scrolling through his phone with the detached expression of someone accustomed to luxury. Diane had served hundreds like him, maybe thousands. They rarely made eye contact, rarely said please or thank you, certainly never remembered her name, despite the small brass tag pinned to her uniform. She approached table 17 with her gray plastic bin, mentally preparing for the usual. A handful of bills if she was lucky, loose change if she wasn't, occasionally nothing at all except the mess they expected her to clean without complaint. But as she got closer, something made her pause. The young man had left in a hurry. She'd noticed him suddenly check his phone, his face shifting from boredom to urgency in seconds. He'd stood, thrown his napkin on the table, and walked out without speaking to anyone. His server, Marcus, who'd been complaining all night about stingy tippers, had shrugged and moved on to other tables. Now Diane stood before table 17, looking down at what he'd left behind. Coins. Just coins. Not bills, not a credit card receipt with a generous tip line filled in. Just 7 coins arranged on the white tablecloth beside his barely touched dessert plate. Diane felt that familiar weight settle in her chest. The quiet humiliation that came with this job. The kind she'd learned to swallow without expression. In a restaurant where the average meal cost $200, leaving coins felt deliberate. A statement. She reached for her bin, ready to sweep them away and forget this table like all the others. But something stopped her hand midair. The coins weren't scattered. They weren't left carelessly in a pile or tossed onto the table in that dismissive way she'd seen countless times. They were arranged. Diane set down her bin slowly. She leaned closer, her eyes narrowing. 7 coins, 3 quarters, 2 dimes, 2 pennies, total value, 97 cents. But it wasn't the amount that caught her attention. It was the pattern. If you're enjoying this story and want to see what Diane discovers, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us bring you more incredible stories like this one. Hit that subscribe button and let's grow this community together. The quarters formed a perfect triangle. The 2 dimes sat precisely in the center, touching each other. The 2 pennies flanked the arrangement on either side, exactly equidistant from the center point. Diane's grandmother had been a seamstress, had taught her young to notice details, to see the difference between careless and careful, between accident and intention. This arrangement wasn't random. Someone had placed these coins deliberately, thoughtfully, with geometric precision. Why? Diane glanced around the dining room. Marcus was taking an order at table 9. Robert, the floor manager, stood near the host stand reviewing reservation sheets. The kitchen doors swung open and closed as servers moved in and out with practiced efficiency. No one was watching her. No one ever watched her. She pulled out her phone, hesitating only a second before taking a photo of the coin arrangement. The flash reflected off the white tablecloth, capturing the precise positioning of each piece. Interesting, isn't it? Diane's heart jumped. She spun around to find Robert standing behind her, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Robert Hensley managed the Sterling Room with an iron fist wrapped in expensive cologne. 40-something, perpetually tanned, with the kind of practiced smile that never reached his eyes. He'd been civil to Diane in 8 years. Never warm, never cold. Professional detachment that made it clear she was staff, not human. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hensley. I was just about to clear the table." "I'm sure you were." His eyes dropped to the coins, then back to her face. "Table 17's guest. Did you happen to notice anything unusual about him? The question felt loaded. Diane chose her words carefully. He left in a hurry. Didn't wait for his check. His meal was prepaid. Credit card on file. Robert stepped closer, lowering his voice. That man is Ethan Harrington. Does that name mean anything to you? Diane shook her head. Harrington Industries. Tech mogul. Worth about $300 million at last count. Robert's eyes flickered to the coins again. And he specifically requested this table. Specifically asked for, let's call it minimal service. No wine pairings, no dessert recommendations, no conversation. Then why come to one of Chicago's finest restaurants just to eat alone and leave 97 cents? Robert's smile was thin. That's an excellent question, Diane. One I've been asking myself since he made the reservation 3 days ago. The dining room suddenly felt smaller. The ambient noise, clinking silverware, murmured conversations, soft jazz from hidden speakers, faded into background static. He called 10 minutes ago, Robert continued. Asked to speak with whoever was assigned to clean table 17. Asked if that person had noticed how the coins were positioned. Diane's throat went dry. Why would he care about that? Why would anyone? Robert's expression shifted, something calculating moving behind his eyes. Unless those coins mean something, unless they're not a tip at all but a message. A message? For who? That's what we're going to find out. Robert gestured toward the coins. Don't touch them yet. Mr. Harrington is on his way back. He wants to speak with whoever looked closely enough to notice the arrangement. But you're the one who stopped to look, Diane. Most people would have swept those coins into their pocket and moved on, but you looked closer. Robert pulled out his own phone, snapping several photos of the table from different angles. Mr. Harrington will be here in 20 minutes. I suggest you make yourself presentable. He walked away before Diane could respond, leaving her standing alone at table 17 with 7 coins and 100 questions. Her hands trembled slightly as she looked down at the arrangement again. A triangle of quarters, 2 dimes touching in the center, 2 pennies on the sides, 97 cents. But worth what exactly? Through the restaurant's front windows, Diane could see Michigan Avenue stretching into the Chicago night, headlights and streetlights painting the darkness. Somewhere out there, a man worth $300 million was returning to a restaurant he'd just left, specifically to talk to a maid who'd noticed something she wasn't supposed to notice, or maybe something she was always meant to see. Diane pulled out her phone again, studying the photo she'd taken. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. Nothing is random, baby girl. Everything tells a story if you know how to read it. What story were these coins telling? And why did a billionaire care if she could read it? 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. Diane stood in the staff bathroom, staring at her reflection under fluorescent lights that made everyone look exhausted. She adjusted her uniform collar, smoothed down flyaway strands of hair that had escaped her bun during the dinner shift, tried to calm the nervous energy coursing through her veins. A billionaire wanted to talk to her. About coins. About a pattern she'd noticed on a table she was supposed to clean and forget. Nothing about this made sense. She pulled out her phone again, studying the photo. The geometric precision of the arrangement nagged at something in the back of her mind. 7 coins, specific denominations, specific positioning. Get yourself together, she whispered to her reflection. It's probably nothing. Some rich person's weird game. But her grandmother's voice wouldn't stop echoing. Everything tells a story. When Diane returned to the dining room, the atmosphere had shifted. The last few customers were settling their bills, gathering coats, preparing to leave. Robert stood near the host stand, checking his watch with barely concealed impatience. Marcus caught her eye from across the room and mouthed, "What's going on?" She could only shrug. At 11:16 p.m., the front door opened. Ethan Harrington entered the Sterling room for the second time that night, but this time Diane was watching him properly. Mid-20s, but carrying himself with the assurance of someone much older. Tall, athletic build beneath that expensive suit. Dark hair perfectly styled. Sharp blue eyes that swept across the dining room with predatory focus until they landed on table 17, then on Diane. Robert moved immediately, intercepting him with practiced hospitality. "Mr. Harrington, welcome back. As requested, we've left table 17 exactly as you left it. And the staff member?" Ethan's voice was crisp, educated, with the faintest hint of East Coast prep school. "This is Diane Mitchell. She's been with us for 8 years, one of our most reliable. I need to speak with her privately." Ethan's tone wasn't rude exactly, but it carried the weight of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted without negotiation. Robert's smile tightened fractionally. Of course. We have a private dining room. Table 17 is fine. Just clear the surrounding tables. Within 3 minutes, Diane found herself sitting across from Ethan Harrington at the very table she'd been about to clear. The coins remained untouched between them, still arranged in their precise pattern. Robert had ushered the last customers out, sent Marcus and the other servers to the kitchen, and positioned himself at a respectful distance near the bar. The Sterling room had never felt so quiet. Ethan studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he leaned back in his chair, that expensive suit creasing in ways that somehow still looked elegant. "Tell me what you saw, Diane." The use of her first name surprised her. Most wealthy customers didn't even read name tags, let alone use them. I noticed the coins were arranged, deliberately, not just left there randomly. Most people wouldn't have noticed that. They would have seen 97 cents and assumed I was either incredibly cheap or making some kind of statement about service staff. He tilted his head slightly. "What made you look closer?" Diane chose her words carefully. "My grandmother was a seamstress. She taught me to see the difference between careless and careful. This arrangement was careful." Something flickered in Ethan's eyes. Surprise? Approval? It vanished too quickly to identify. "What else did you notice?" 3 quarters forming a triangle, 2 dimes in the center touching, 2 pennies on the sides equidistant from center. She paused. 97 cents total. "And what do you think it means?" The question hung in the air between them. Diane glanced at Robert, who was pretending not to listen from his position at the bar. She looked back at Ethan. "I think it's a code, or a message. I think you left it specifically for someone to find, and you wanted to know if that person would be observant enough to notice it wasn't random." Ethan's expression remained neutral, but she caught the slightest shift in his posture. Tension releasing, perhaps, or gathering. "Why would I do that? I don't know. But someone worth $300 million doesn't leave 97 cents as a tip, unless those 97 cents mean something more than money." The silence stretched. Through the restaurant's windows, Chicago's nightlife continued. Cars passing, distant sirens, the steady pulse of a city that never truly slept. Inside the Sterling room, time seemed suspended. Finally, Ethan leaned forward, his voice dropping to just above a whisper. "My sister disappeared 3 years ago, vanished without a trace from this city. The police investigated for 6 months, found nothing, declared her a voluntary missing person. Case closed." His jaw tightened, but Eleanor wouldn't just disappear. She was methodical, brilliant, careful. If she left clues. Diane's heart began beating faster. The coins. Eleanor was obsessed with puzzles. Always had been since we were kids. She'd leave me coded messages, treasure hunts, mathematical riddles. Our own private language. Ethan's hand moved toward the coins but didn't touch them. Before she disappeared, she told me that if anything ever happened to her, I should look for patterns. Specifically, patterns in places people don't usually notice. Like on a restaurant table. Like on a restaurant table in a place she used to work. Ethan's eyes met Diane's directly. Eleanor worked at the Sterling room 4 years ago. Bus staff, then server. She worked here for 8 months before moving to a position at Harrington Industries. The room suddenly felt colder. Diane glanced around the Sterling room with new eyes, imagining a young woman, Ethan's sister, moving through these same spaces, carrying the same gray bin, clearing these same tables. Did anyone here know her? Robert Hensley was assistant manager then. He remembers her vaguely. Says she was quiet, efficient, no problems. Ethan's expression darkened. But 3 weeks before she disappeared, Eleanor came back here. Ate dinner alone at table 17. Left the restaurant and, according to security footage, walked east on Michigan Avenue. That's the last confirmed sighting. Diane felt pieces clicking into place, though the full picture remained frustratingly unclear. "And you think she left some kind of message? Using coins?" "I've been retracing her steps for 3 years, going through her apartment, her computer, her phone records, anything the police might have missed. 2 months ago I found a notebook. Inside were mathematical sequences, geometric patterns, and one phrase, pennies from heaven, quarters from hell." Ethan pulled out his phone, showing Diane a photo of handwritten notes covered in numbers and diagrams. "I've been studying these patterns, trying to understand what she was trying to communicate. And this arrangement," Diane gestured to the coins, "is one of the patterns from her notebook. Page 47. I've tried everything. Numerology, cryptography, geometric analysis. Nothing works. But then I realized I was missing something obvious." He looked at Diane intently. I was looking at the pattern as a billionaire, from a position of privilege and education and resources. But Eleanor wasn't leaving messages for people like me when she created these codes. She was leaving them for people like her, Diane said quietly. People who worked here, people who see tables differently, people who notice small things because small things matter when you don't have much. Ethan nodded slowly. My sister grew up with everything, but she chose to work service jobs. She said it taught her more about people than any Harvard classroom ever could. She saw the world from angles I never could. Diane studied the coins again, her mind racing. 3 quarters, 75 cents. 2 dimes, 20 cents. 2 pennies, 2 cents. Total 97 cents. What if it's not about the total value? She said, thinking out loud. What if each group of coins represents something different? 3, 2, 2, or 75, 20, 2. I've tried those combinations, every variation I could think of. Frustration edged into Ethan's voice. Numbers, dates, addresses, phone numbers, coordinates, nothing connects. Maybe you're thinking too big. Diane leaned closer to the table, examining the physical positioning. The triangle of quarters pointed toward the window. The dimes in the center touched each other at a specific angle. The pennies. She froze. The pennies are different, she whispered. Ethan leaned in. What? Look at the pennies. They're not the same. One is newer, shinier. One is older, more worn. She pointed without touching. And they're positioned differently. The new penny faces heads up. The old penny faces heads down. Ethan stared at the coins, then at Diane, something shifting in his expression. All this time I've been treating them as identical, interchangeable. But you're right. They're different pennies, positioned differently, which means they're telling you something specific about those 2 positions. Diane's pulse quickened. What if the triangle shows you where to look? The dimes show you the center point and the pennies mark 2 different states. One positive, one negative, one up, one down, one new, one old. Past and present, Ethan breathed. Eleanor worked here in the past. Something happened here. But the message exists in the present right now in this restaurant. They both looked around the Sterling room simultaneously. The elegant dining room suddenly seemed full of possibilities, hiding secrets in plain sight. Robert cleared his throat from his position at the bar. Is everything all right, Mr. Harrington? Ethan ignored him, his focus entirely on Diane. You see this place differently than I do. You know its rhythms, its patterns, where things belong and where they don't. If Eleanor left a message here, hidden in plain sight, where would it be? Diane thought about 8 years of working in the Sterling room. 8 years of cleaning tables, wiping down surfaces, moving through spaces that wealthy diners never noticed. Staff areas, utility closets, the small corners of an elegant restaurant where reality lived behind the facade. Places staff go but customers don't, she said slowly. Places that haven't changed much in 4 years. Places where something could be hidden and never found unless you knew exactly where to look. Ethan stood abruptly. Show me. Robert Hensley's carefully maintained composure cracked as Ethan and Diane stood together, clearly preparing to go somewhere within the restaurant. Mr. Harrington, I'm not sure what's happening here, but the Sterling room has protocols. Staff areas are restricted for liability reasons. Then you'll accompany us. Ethan's tone brooked no argument. I'm conducting a private investigation into my sister's disappearance, and Diane is assisting me. Unless you'd prefer I contact the restaurant's ownership directly? The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Robert's practiced smile returned, though it looked painted on. Of course. Where would you like to start? Diane's mind raced through the geography of the Sterling room. The main dining area was all performance. White tablecloths, crystal, carefully curated ambiance. But behind the elegant facade existed another world entirely. The kitchen, the storage areas, the break room, the supply closets. Places where the real work happened, where staff moved through their shifts invisible to the customers paying $300 for dinner. Eleanor worked bus staff first, Diane said, her voice steadier than she felt. That means she would have spent time in the dish pit, the storage room, the staff areas, places she accessed dozens of times every shift. The staff break room hasn't changed in 6 years, Robert offered, clearly trying to regain control of the situation. Same lockers, same furniture. We renovated the kitchen 3 years ago, but the ancillary spaces remained the same. 3 years ago, right around when Eleanor disappeared, Diane led them through the swinging kitchen doors. The dinner shift had ended, and the space hummed with end-of-night cleanup energy. 2 line cooks scrubbed down stations. A dishwasher named Miguel worked through the last rack of plates, steam rising around him in clouds. They all looked up as Diane entered with Ethan Harrington and Robert Hensley in tow, an unusual procession that made everyone pause. "Continue with closing procedures," Robert announced. "Mr. Harrington is conducting personal business." They moved through the kitchen into a narrow hallway Diane had walked thousands of times. White walls, industrial gray flooring, fluorescent lighting that hummed constantly. To the left, the walk-in refrigerator. To the right, dry storage. Straight ahead, the staff break room. Ethan studied everything with sharp attention, his eyes moving across surfaces, corners, the mundane details of a working restaurant's backstage. "Eleanor would have had a locker," he said. "Staff lockers are in the break room," Robert confirmed. "But they're reassigned constantly. I couldn't tell you which one she used 4 years ago." The break room was exactly as Diane remembered from her first day 8 years ago. 12 gray metal lockers lined one wall. A worn sofa sat against another, its upholstery cracked and faded. A small table with mismatched chairs occupied the center. A microwave, a coffee maker, and a water cooler completed the sparse amenities. Nothing hidden, nothing unusual. Just a tired space where tired people took breaks from serving people who'd never see this room. Ethan walked the perimeter slowly, his fingers trailing along locker doors, the back of the sofa, the edge of the table. Diane watched him, understanding that he was trying to feel his sister's presence, trying to imagine her in this space. "She would have sat here," he said quietly, stopping at the sofa. Eleanor always chose corners. Liked having walls on two sides, visibility on the approach. Habit from childhood, we played too many strategy games. Diane sat down beside him, seeing the room from this angle, facing the door, full view of the lockers, the table to the right, the water cooler to the left. "What exactly are we looking for?" Robert asked, his patience clearly wearing thin despite the prospect of offending a billionaire. "A pattern," Diane answered before Ethan could. "Your sister thought in patterns. The coins showed us geometry, triangle, center point, two opposing positions. We need to find that same structure here." Ethan looked at her with something approaching respect. "You understand her." "I understand being invisible," Diane said simply. "People like your sister and me, we see things because nobody's watching us see. We notice details because details are all we have control over in jobs like this." The truth of it hung in the air. Robert shifted uncomfortably. Diane stood, moving to the lockers. 12 units, arranged in 2 rows of 6. Standard combination locks, most of them showing years of wear. She thought about Eleanor, 4 years younger, moving through this space between shifts, storing her belongings, changing shoes, taking breaks, leaving messages. "The pennies," Diane said suddenly. "New and old, past and present. What if she marked something to show time passing? Something that would change gradually, naturally, but still be recognizable if you knew what to look for?" Ethan joined her at the lockers. "These are all the same model. But look at the wear patterns," Diane pointed. "Most have scratches, dents, paint chipping, signs of years of use, but these 3, she indicated 3 lockers in the bottom row, these have different damage patterns, deliberate marks." Ethan knelt down, examining the locker doors more closely. "You're right, these scratches, they're not random. On the first locker, someone had scratched 3 parallel lines. On the second, 2 small circles side by side. On the third, 2 marks. 1 vertical line, 1 horizontal line, creating an uneven cross. 3, 2, 2, Diane whispered. "Like the coins. 3 quarters, 2 dimes, 2 pennies. Robert leaned in, his skepticism visibly wavering. "Those could be random. Kids mess around with lockers all the time." "These aren't random," Ethan said firmly. He pulled out his phone, photographing the marks from multiple angles. "These are Eleanor's marks. I'd know her handwriting anywhere, even scratched into metal. She had a specific way of making lines, always starting from top left, always consistent pressure." Diane felt adrenaline surge through her exhaustion. "Can we open them?" "They're combination locks," Robert said, "and I don't have a master list of combinations. Staff set their own codes." Ethan stared at the 3 marked lockers. 3, 2, 2. What if that's not just a pattern? What if it's the combination? "That's only 3 numbers," Robert pointed out. "These locks require at least 3, usually 4. Try 3223, Diane suggested. The pattern in reverse, or 322, different groupings. Ethan tried the first locker. 3223. Nothing. He tried 3223. The lock clicked open. The locker door swung wide, revealing an interior covered in dust. empty except for one item, a small notebook with a worn leather cover secured with an elastic band. Nobody spoke. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. In the kitchen, Miguel dropped a pan with a distant clang. Ethan reached for the notebook with hands that trembled slightly, the first sign of emotion breaking through his controlled exterior. He pulled it out carefully, as if it might disintegrate at his touch. "Is that?" Robert began. "Eleanor's journal," Ethan finished, his voice rough. "She always kept one. Police never found it when they searched her apartment. I assumed she had it with her when she disappeared." He opened the cover. Eleanor's handwriting filled the first page. Neat, precise, the same handwriting Diane had seen in the photo of mathematical patterns. "If you're reading this, I'm either dead or I've run. Either way, I couldn't stay silent anymore. This journal contains everything I discovered about the Sterling Room, about what happens in the private dining rooms, about who really owns this restaurant and what they use it for. I thought I was just a server. I thought I was invisible, but invisible people see everything. Ethan, if this is you, and I hope it is, you need to be careful. They're powerful, they're connected, and they've been using this restaurant for money laundering, blackmail, and worse for at least a decade. The evidence is here, hidden in plain sight. But you'll need help from someone who understands how this place really works. Someone who sees what I saw. Trust the person who found this journal. They're observant enough to follow my breadcrumbs. They're invisible enough to move unnoticed. And they're brave enough to look closer when everyone else would walk away." The entry was dated 3 years, 2 months, and 14 days ago, and 2 weeks before Eleanor Harrington's last confirmed sighting. Diane's hands felt cold despite the stuffy warmth of the break room. She looked at Robert, whose face had gone carefully blank, the expression of someone working very hard to show no reaction. "I think," Robert said slowly, "that we should take this to the police. This is beyond the scope of—" "The police declared my sister a voluntary missing person," Ethan interrupted, his eyes still on the journal. "They stopped investigating. But this," he held up the notebook, "this is proof she was running from something, or someone." He turned to Diane. "Will you help me?" The question was simple. The implications were anything but. Diane thought about 8 years of invisible work, 8 years of cleaning up after people who never saw her, never thanked her, never considered that she might notice things. She thought about Eleanor, another invisible woman who'd seen too much and paid the price. She thought about the coins arranged on table 17, a message left specifically for someone observant enough, someone careful enough, someone invisible enough to read it. "Yes," she said. Robert's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and Diane caught the flash of something across his face. Alarm, maybe, or calculation. "I need to make a call," he said, already backing toward the door. "Restaurant business, I'll give you two some privacy." He left too quickly, too deliberately. Ethan noticed it too. "We need to leave, now." "Why?" "Because Robert Hensley was assistant manager 4 years ago when Eleanor worked here. He's been manager for 3 years, promoted right after she disappeared." Ethan was already moving, tucking the journal inside his suit jacket. "And because Eleanor's journal just called this place a front for criminal activity. If Robert's involved..." The lights went out. Complete darkness engulfed the break room. The constant hum of fluorescent lights died, leaving only the distant sounds of the kitchen winding down. "Power outage?" Diane whispered, though she knew better. "Emergency exits," Ethan said. "Where? Through the kitchen, out the back, or through the dining room to the front?" Diane's eyes adjusted slowly to the darkness. Emergency lighting should have kicked in. It hadn't. A door closed somewhere in the restaurant. Heavy footsteps in the hallway. More than one person. Ethan grabbed Diane's arm. "Is there another way out?" She thought fast, mapping 8 years of routine in her mind. Loading dock. Through dry storage, past the walk-in, left corridor. But, "Show me." They moved through the darkness, Diane leading by memory and touch. Her hand found the doorframe, then the wall of the hallway. Behind them, the footsteps grew closer. Voices, male, low conversation she couldn't make out. The walk-in refrigerator hummed to their right, still running, which meant this wasn't a total power outage. Someone had killed specific lights, someone who knew which breakers to flip. Diane's hand found the dry storage door. She pulled it open, and they slipped inside among shelves of industrial-sized cans and boxes, the smell of cardboard and preserved food. Darkness so complete she couldn't see her own hands. "Keep moving," Ethan breathed behind her. She navigated by memory. 3 steps forward, turn left, 5 more steps, another left. The loading dock door should be... Light blazed from behind them, flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. "They're in here," a voice Diane didn't recognize. "Block the front exits." Her hand found the loading dock door's crash bar. She pushed. Locked. "It's supposed to be emergency exit," she whispered frantically. "It's not supposed to lock from inside." "They prepared for this," Ethan said. "They knew we'd run." The flashlight beams swept closer. Diane's mind raced through possibilities with the cold clarity that comes from pure survival instinct. 8 years of navigating this restaurant's back corridors suddenly became the difference between escape and whatever those men intended. "The dumb waiter," she whispered. "What?" "Old service elevator. Connects the basement wine cellar to the main floor. They stopped using it years ago when they installed the new wine storage system. But the shaft is still there." She grabbed Ethan's hand in the darkness. "Storage room. Behind the flower shelf." The flashlight beams swept through the dry storage area, creating moving shadows among industrial shelves. Diane pulled Ethan deeper into the maze of supplies using the darkness as cover. Her fingers found familiar landmarks: the rough texture of 50-pound rice bags, the smooth metal of restaurant-grade olive oil containers, the cardboard corners of pasta boxes stacked to the ceiling. There, a voice behind them. Movement near the back wall. Diane's hand found the flower shelf, a massive industrial unit bolted to the wall. Behind it, hidden in shadows and forgotten by everyone except staff who'd worked here long enough to remember the old layout, was a narrow access panel. She squeezed behind the shelf, pulling Ethan with her. The space was barely 2 feet wide, designed decades ago when building codes were more lenient and worker safety less prioritized. Her fingers found the panel's edge, rusted hinges that hadn't moved in years. "It's stuck," she breathed. Ethan shouldered past her in the confined space, his body pressed against hers in the darkness. She felt him examine the panel, finding the same rusted hinges, testing the resistance. Behind them, the flashlights grew brighter. "Closer. On 3, Ethan whispered. 1, 2, he slammed his shoulder into the panel. The shriek of metal on metal echoed through the storage room. Loud, unmistakable, giving away their position completely. But the panel gave way. "Go!" Ethan shoved Diane through the opening into a shaft of pure darkness. She fell forward, hands finding rough wooden planks, decades of dust coating everything. The smell of old wood and decay hit her like a physical force. Ethan tumbled in behind her, pulling the panel shut just as flashlight beams converged on their hiding spot. They heard the shelf scrape, men grunting with effort as they tried to move the heavy unit. "Down," Diane said, her hands finding the ladder built into the shaft's wall. Old wood, some rungs missing or rotten. Carefully. Some rungs won't hold. They descended into darkness so complete it felt solid. Diane tested each rung before trusting her weight to it, wood creaking ominously under her hands. Above them, the panel burst open again. Flashlight beams stabbed down into the shaft. "They're in the dumbwaiter shaft. Get to the basement, cut them off." The voices echoed in the confined space. Diane moved faster, years of climbing stairs during double shifts giving her the endurance to keep going. Ethan followed, his breathing controlled despite the exertion. Her foot found solid ground. They'd reached the basement level. The wine cellar stretched out in the dim emergency lighting that apparently still worked down here. Rows of climate-controlled storage, thousands of bottles worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The Sterling Room's famous collection, maintained at perfect temperature and humidity. Diane's knowledge of the basement was limited. Staff rarely came down here except for specific wine retrieval during service, but she knew there had to be another exit. Fire codes demanded it. This way. She led Ethan through the wine racks, moving deeper into the cellar. The temperature dropped noticeably, the air dry and still. Behind them, the dumbwaiter shaft echoed with the sounds of pursuit. Heavy footfalls on the ladder. At least 2 men, maybe more. "There has to be a street exit," Ethan said, thinking along the same lines. "Building code requires basement egress." They rounded a corner in the wine storage and stopped. The basement was larger than Diane had imagined. Beyond the wine cellar, the space opened into what looked like storage rooms and utility areas. But one door stood out, heavy metal, institutional, with a keycard reader mounted beside it. "That's not standard restaurant architecture," Ethan observed. Diane approached the door carefully. The keycard reader glowed with a small red LED. Locked. But through the crack at the bottom of the door she could see light. Not emergency lighting. Deliberate, fluorescent illumination. She knelt down, pressing her eye to the gap. What she saw made her blood run cold. A room. Large, clinical, white walls, white floors, white ceiling, and along one wall filing cabinets, dozens of them. In the center of the room, a large table covered with papers, photographs, and computer equipment. What is it? Ethan knelt beside her. An office, but not for restaurant business. Diane's voice was barely audible. Your sister's journal said money laundering, blackmail, worse. I think this is where it happens. Footsteps echoed from the wine cellar. Their pursuers had reached the basement. Ethan tried the door handle. Locked. He examined the keycard reader, then looked around desperately. We need to get in there. If Eleanor's evidence is anywhere... Wait. Diane grabbed his arm. Listen. Voices. But not from the wine cellar. From inside the locked room. Confirmed they have the journal. A man's voice, muffled by the door but audible. Hensley says the Harrington boy and one of the cleaners. The cleaner is a problem. A second voice, older, gravelly with authority. She knows the building layout. Could hide anywhere. We've locked down all exits. They're trapped in the basement. Then find them and retrieve that journal. Eleanor Harrington created enough problems 3 years ago. I won't have her brother finishing what she started. Diane felt Ethan stiffen beside her. His hands clenched into fists. The first voice continued. What about the police? Harrington has connections. If he contacts, he won't. Not until he understands what his sister discovered, and by then it'll be too late. A pause. The senator's dinner is tomorrow night. Private dining room 3. We can't have any complications. Is everything prepared? Yes, sir. The documents are ready for signature. The transaction will clear by midnight tomorrow. Good. Once the senator signs, we'll have protection at the state level. After that, it won't matter what evidence surfaces. We'll be untouchable. Diane's mind reeled. Senator, documents, transactions. Eleanor's journal had mentioned corruption, but this sounded organized, systematic, far beyond a single restaurant's illegal activity. Ethan pulled out his phone, quickly setting it to record. He held it near the door's gap, capturing the conversation. What about the girl? The gravelly voice again. Eleanor, has there been any activity on her accounts? Nothing. 3 years, not a single transaction. No credit cards, no bank withdrawals, no digital footprint. Then she's dead. Has to be. No one stays hidden that completely unless they're in a grave. Ethan's jaw clenched so tight Diane heard his teeth grind. She put a warning hand on his arm, urging silence. Her brother won't stop looking, the first voice said. Then we'll give him what he wants. Closure. A body in the river. Tragic accident from 3 years ago, finally discovered. Case closed. The sound of a chair scraping. First, retrieve that journal. Make sure he understands what happens to people who dig too deep. Footsteps approached the door from inside. Diane and Ethan scrambled backward, finding cover behind a massive wine rack. The door opened with an electronic beep, spilling light into the basement corridor. 2 men emerged. The first was Robert Hensley, his earlier professional demeanor replaced with cold efficiency. The second was older, 60-something, silver hair and an expensive suit that screamed political connections. Diane had never seen him before, but something about his bearing, the way he commanded the space, the authority in every movement, told her this was the man in charge. They turned toward the wine cellar where the sounds of searching continued. Thorough sweep, the older man ordered. Every room, every storage space. I want that journal in my hands in 10 minutes. Yes, Mr. Castellano. Castellano. The name meant nothing to Diane, but Ethan's sharp intake of breath suggested recognition. The 2 men disappeared into the wine cellar. The metal door swung shut behind them, the lock engaging automatically. Victor Castellano, Ethan whispered. Real estate developer. City council connections. My sister mentioned him once. Said he was a regular at the Sterling Room's private dinners. I thought she meant he just liked expensive food. He owns this place, Diane said, pieces falling into position. The restaurant is a front. Those private dining rooms, that's where the real business happens. Politicians, developers, whoever needs deals, made away from public record. And Eleanor discovered it. Ethan's voice was hollow. She saw something during one of those private dinners. Heard something. Documented it. And they killed her for it. The words hung in the air between them, giving voice to the fear Ethan had carried for 3 years. They said no activity on her accounts. Ethan said quietly, no digital footprint. That means, it doesn't mean anything yet. Diane surprised herself with the firmness in her voice. Your sister was smart. Smart enough to leave you breadcrumbs. Smart enough to hide this journal where only the right person would find it. Maybe she's smart enough to hide herself. It was thin hope, and they both knew it. But hope was better than the alternative. Shouting erupted from the wine cellar. Check the utility rooms. They couldn't have gone far. Diane scanned their surroundings with new urgency. The basement was a maze of rooms and corridors, most of which she'd never explored. But there had to be another way out. Fire codes demanded it. Her eyes landed on a red sign above a door 20 feet away. Exit. There. She grabbed Ethan's hand. Emergency exit. Has to lead to the street. They ran, footsteps echoing on concrete floors. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit intensified. Shouting. More flashlights. The systematic search converging on their location. Diane hit the emergency exit door at full speed, slamming the crash bar. An alarm shrieked to life, piercing, deafening, designed to alert the entire building. The door opened onto a concrete stairwell, steps leading up to street level. Cold December air rushed down from above, carrying the sounds of Chicago nightlife. Freedom was literally 30 steps away. Go. Ethan pushed her ahead of him. They took the stairs 2 at a time. Behind them, the basement door crashed open. Multiple footsteps in pursuit. Diane burst out onto the street at full sprint, Ethan right behind her. Michigan Avenue stretched before them, streetlights and traffic and pedestrians and blessed anonymous normalcy. The Sterling Room's emergency exit had deposited them in an alley 1 block east of the main entrance. My car. Ethan pulled out his keys, clicking a button. Lights flashed on a black Mercedes parked 50 feet away. Get in! Diane dove into the passenger seat as Ethan fired up the engine. Through the rear window, she saw men emerging from the alley. Robert Hensley in the lead, phone pressed to his ear, already making calls. The Mercedes pulled into traffic with a screech of tires. Where are we going? Diane asked, her heart hammering. Somewhere safe. Ethan navigated through late-night traffic with practiced skill. Somewhere we can read Eleanor's journal without looking over our shoulders. They'll be looking for your car, your credit cards, your phone. I know. He took a sharp turn onto a side street, which is why we're ditching all of it. Phone, car, anything they can trace. Diane looked at him. This billionaire who'd walked into a restaurant looking for answers and was now running for his life with a complete stranger. You don't have to involve me further. Drop me somewhere safe. I can disappear. They saw you with me. They know you found the journal. You're involved whether you want to be or not. Ethan's expression was grim. I'm sorry. If I'd known this would put you in danger. Your sister tried to expose them. She used every advantage she had. Her invisibility, her access, her intelligence, and they killed her for it. Diane's voice hardened. Someone needs to finish what she started. Someone who's invisible enough to move unnoticed. Someone who sees what others miss. Ethan glanced at her, something shifting in his eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or respect. Eleanor would have liked you, he said quietly. They drove in silence for several minutes, weaving through Chicago's grid of streets. Finally, Ethan pulled into a parking garage 3 blocks from Millennium Park. We walk from here. He grabbed Eleanor's journal from inside his jacket, then pulled out his wallet, extracting a thick fold of cash. Leave everything else. Phones, credit cards, anything with tracking. Diane had only her house keys and a beaten-up wallet containing $43 and an expired library card. She left her phone on the seat, a cheap prepaid model that barely worked anyway. They emerged from the parking garage into the Chicago night. Wednesday was becoming Thursday, the clock ticking past midnight. Around them, the city continued its restless energy. Late workers heading home, bar hoppers moving between venues, the homeless seeking warm grates, all the invisible people who made a city function. Now what? Diane asked. Ethan looked at Eleanor's journal, then at Diane, then at the city stretching around them in all directions. Now we read what my sister died to protect, and we figure out how to expose people powerful enough to make someone disappear without a trace. Diane thought about 8 years of invisibility, 8 years of being overlooked, underestimated, forgotten the moment she left a room. For the first time in her life, that invisibility felt like an advantage. I know a place, she said. Somewhere nobody would think to look. The building stood on the south side of Chicago, tucked between a laundromat that had been closed for years and a corner store with bars on the windows. 4 stories of weathered brick, fire escapes zigzagging down the facade like scars. The kind of place people passed without seeing, which made it perfect. You live here? Ethan asked, no judgment in his voice, just curiosity. 3rd floor. Diane led him through a security door that hadn't locked properly in months. It's not much, but it's off the grid. Rent in cash. Landlord doesn't ask questions. No doorman to remember faces. They climbed stairs that smelled of old cooking and neglect. Diane's apartment was at the end of a dim hallway, door number 3F barely visible in peeling gold numbers. She unlocked 3 separate locks, deadbolt, chain, and a slide bolt she'd installed herself after a break-in 2 years ago. Inside, the apartment was exactly what 8 years of restaurant wages could afford in Chicago. One room serving as bedroom and living space, a kitchenette with a hot plate and mini fridge, a bathroom the size of a closet. Second-hand furniture arranged with care, clean, sparse, dignified despite its poverty. Ethan didn't comment on the contrast between this and the world he came from. He simply stood in the center of the small room, Eleanor's journal in his hands, looking suddenly exhausted. "We're safe here?" he asked. "Safe as anywhere." Diane locked all 3 locks behind them. "Nobody knows about this place except my landlord, and he's too busy avoiding tax authorities to care who I bring home." She pulled the apartment's only chair, a wooden kitchen chair with a cracked seat, to the small table near the window. Ethan sat down, placing the journal on the table like it was something sacred, which Diane supposed it was. The last words of his sister, evidence of whatever had gotten her killed. Diane perched on the edge of her bed, the only other sitting space available. Between them, Eleanor's leather-bound journal seemed to pulse with secrets. "Before we open it," Ethan said quietly, "I need you to understand something. Whatever's in here, whatever Eleanor discovered, it got her killed, or disappeared. Either way, the people responsible are powerful enough to make that happen and cover it up for 3 years." He looked at Diane directly. "If you want to walk away right now, I'll understand. I can give you money, help you relocate, make sure you're safe. But if we read this journal together, if we start down this path, there's no going back. They'll come after us. Both of us." Diane thought about the men chasing them through the Sterling room's basement. The cold efficiency in Victor Castellano's voice as he discussed making Ethan search for his sister end with closure and a manufactured body. The casual way they'd talked about Eleanor as if she were already dead. She thought about 8 years of serving people who never saw her. 8 years of cleaning up messes, absorbing disrespect, being invisible. 8 years of being powerless. "Your sister left those coins for someone to find," Diane said. "Someone observant. Someone invisible. Someone who knew what it was like to work in that restaurant and see things nobody else noticed." She met Ethan's eyes. "She left them for someone like me. I'm not walking away." Ethan nodded slowly, something like relief crossing his face. "Thank you." He opened the journal. Eleanor's handwriting filled the pages. Neat, precise, the script of someone who thought carefully before writing. The first entry was dated 4 years and 3 months ago. First day at the Sterling room. "They put me on bus duty, which is perfect. Bus staff are even more invisible than servers. I can move through the dining room, clear tables, watch everything without anyone noticing me watching. Already seeing patterns. Table assignments aren't random. Certain servers get certain tables. The private dining rooms especially. Only senior staff with years of tenure. Robert says it's about experience and trust, but I think it's about discretion. Met Diane today. She's been here 8 years. Quiet, efficient, sees everything. The kind of person who could tell you stories but never would. I like her." Diane's breath caught. Eleanor had noticed her, had seen her the same way Diane had learned to see others, as someone invisible who therefore saw everything. Ethan glanced up. "She mentioned you." "I barely remember her," Diane admitted. "Just another server passing through. The Sterling room has high turnover except for people like me who have nowhere else to go." They continued reading. The early entries documented Eleanor's observations about the Sterling room's operations. Guest lists that didn't match reservation books. Deliveries that came through the back entrance after midnight. Private dining rooms that were scheduled but showed no record in the official system. Then, 3 months into her employment, Eleanor's entries shifted. "Tonight I worked a private dinner in room 3. 6 guests. I wasn't supposed to be there. Maria called in sick and they needed emergency coverage. Robert looked nervous when he assigned me, but they were desperate. The guests. 2 city councilmen I recognized from news coverage, a state senator, Victor Castellano, real estate developer, major downtown projects, and 2 men I didn't recognize but who carried themselves like lawyers or accountants. The conversation was careful at first. Business talk, development projects, zoning discussions, normal rich people dinner conversation. But after the 3rd bottle of wine, things got interesting. Castellano started talking about adjustments to building permits. The senator mentioned facilitation fees. One of the councilmen laughed about creative accounting. I kept my head down, cleared plates, refilled water glasses. Invisible, but I was listening and recording. Ethan looked up sharply. She recorded them? Diane leaned forward. Keep reading. I've been wearing a small digital recorder pinned inside my uniform, activated by a button in my pocket. Nobody notices a busgirl fumbling with her apron. I've been documenting everything I hear in the private dining rooms. It started as curiosity, then it became evidence. The Sterling Room isn't just a restaurant, it's a meeting place, a venue where powerful people conduct business they can't conduct in public. Zoning changes bought with cash, building inspections that disappear, contracts awarded to highest bidders who aren't actually bidding. They're paying directly for the contract itself, and it's all flowing through Victor Castellano. He's the center, the fixer, the man who makes problems disappear and opportunities appear for the right price. The next 20 pages documented dates, conversations, names. Eleanor had been systematic, creating a ledger of corruption that read like a prosecutor's dream. City contracts, real estate deals, permits approved despite violations, inspections that never happened despite complaints. This is massive, Diane whispered. This isn't just money laundering, this is systematic municipal corruption. Chicago has a history of it, Ethan said grimly. But this kind of evidence, recordings, documentation, specific dates, and dollar amounts, this could bring down half the city council. They kept reading. Eleanor's entries grew more detailed, more careful. She'd started cross-referencing public records, matching what she heard in private dinners to what appeared in official city documents. The discrepancies were damning. Then, 6 months into her documentation, the tone shifted again. They're suspicious. Robert has been watching me differently, asking questions about my background, my family. I think someone noticed I've been in the private rooms more than usual. I need to be more careful, or I need to get out. But if I leave now, all this evidence disappears. These people will keep operating, keep corrupting, keep profiting while regular people can't get building permits or business licenses without paying bribes. I can't let that happen. 3 entries later, I made contact with a journalist, Sarah Chen from the Tribune. She specializes in municipal corruption. We met in a coffee shop in Evanston, far from anyone who might recognize me. I showed her copies of my recordings, transcripts of conversations. She went pale. This is Pulitzer-level evidence, she said, but it's also incredibly dangerous. These people, Castellano especially, they have reach, resources. They've made problems disappear before. She's right to be cautious, but she's also interested. We agreed I'd continue gathering evidence for 2 more months, build an ironclad case. Then she'd publish, I'd testify if needed, and we'd blow the whole operation open. 2 more months. I can do this for 2 more months. But Eleanor didn't have 2 more months. The entries became sporadic, paranoid. Notes about being followed. Strange cars parked outside her apartment. Her locker at the Sterling Room being searched when she wasn't there. They know. I don't know how, but they know I'm documenting them. Robert pulled me aside today. Friendly conversation. Asked if I was happy at the Sterling Room. Said he'd noticed I seemed stressed lately. Offered me time off. It felt like a threat. I need to move up my timeline. Get the recordings to Sarah Chen immediately, but I can't risk carrying them on me. If they search my apartment, my car, they'll find everything. I need to hide the evidence somewhere they won't think to look. Somewhere that will survive even if I don't. The next entry was the last one dated before Eleanor's disappearance. I've hidden everything. The recordings, the documentation, the full scope of what I've discovered. It's in a place they'll never think to search, but a place where someone smart enough, observant enough, will eventually find it. Ethan, if you're reading this, and I think you will be because you're stubborn and you never give up on puzzles, the evidence is in the restaurant, not in the basement office where they keep their criminal records, not in the private dining rooms, in plain sight, where invisible people work. The coins will show you. 3 points to form a triangle, 2 points to mark the center, 2 points to show past and present. Trust the person who finds this journal. They're observant enough to follow breadcrumbs, smart enough to understand patterns, and invisible enough to move through places I can't anymore. I'm sorry I couldn't finish this myself. I'm sorry for whatever comes next. But the truth is more important than one person. The truth is more important than me. Stop them, Ethan. Stop all of them. I love you. Tell Mom and Dad I tried to do the right thing. E. The journal entry ended there. No further entries. No explanation of where Eleanor went or what happened to her after she wrote those words. Ethan's hands trembled as he set down the journal. His eyes were wet, though he didn't let the tears fall. She knew, he said hoarsely. She knew they were coming for her, and she hid the evidence anyway. Diane felt her own throat tighten. She was trying to protect it, protect the truth, even knowing what it might cost her. The recordings, Ethan said. She mentioned hiding recordings, full documentation, everything she gathered. It's still in the restaurant somewhere. In plain sight, where invisible people work. Diane repeated Eleanor's words. Not the basement, not the private rooms. Somewhere we'd see every day without thinking about it. They sat in silence, the weight of Eleanor's final message settling over them. Outside Diane's window, Chicago's nighttime symphony continued. Distant sirens, traffic, the urban heartbeat that never stopped. Ethan pulled out his phone before remembering he'd left it in the car. We need to contact Sarah Chen, the journalist Eleanor was working with. If she still has copies of some evidence, 3 years is a long time, Diane cautioned. And if Eleanor disappeared before she could deliver the full documentation, the journalist might have backed off. Too dangerous without the complete story. We have the journal now. We have Eleanor's testimony in her own words. That's something. Ethan stood, pacing the small apartment. But without the recordings, without the hard evidence, it's just accusations. They'll deny everything. Say Eleanor was a disgruntled employee making up stories. Diane thought about the coin pattern. 3 quarters forming a triangle. 2 dimes marking the center. 2 pennies showing past and present. The triangle points the way, she said slowly. The center marks the location. Past and present mark 2 different states of the same place. The restaurant has changed in 3 years, Ethan said, following her logic. Renovations, updates. What if Eleanor hid the evidence in something that existed then but doesn't exist now? Or exists differently? Robert said they renovated the kitchen 3 years ago. Diane's mind raced. Right around when Eleanor disappeared. What if that wasn't coincidence? What if they renovated specifically to destroy evidence? But Eleanor wrote this journal entry knowing she might not survive. She wouldn't hide evidence somewhere that could be destroyed by renovation. Ethan stopped pacing. She'd hide it somewhere permanent, structural, something that survives renovations because it's part of the building itself. They looked at each other, the same realization dawning simultaneously. The walls, Diane whispered. Before Ethan could respond, his phone, the one he'd left in the car, began ringing from its abandoned location blocks away. Neither of them could hear it, but they didn't need to, because at that exact moment, Diane's apartment building's fire alarm erupted in a piercing shriek. Ethan moved to the window, peering down at the street below. His face went pale. There are men down there, 3 of them, watching the exits. Fire alarm is fake, Diane said, already moving. They're trying to flush us out. How did they find us? Diane grabbed the journal from the table. Doesn't matter. We need to move. Now. The building had 2 exits, front and back. Both would be watched. But Diane had lived here for 3 years, and poverty taught resourcefulness. Fire escape, she said, moving to the window. Connects to the building next door. Old connection from when both buildings shared ownership. Landlord doesn't know about it. She pushed open the window, winter air flooding into the apartment. The fire escape rattled as she stepped onto it, metal cold beneath her hands. Ethan followed, pulling the window shut behind them. Below, the men watching the building exits remained focused on the doors. Nobody looked up. People rarely did. Diane led Ethan across the fire escape, the city spreading below them in patterns of light and shadow. At the edge of her building, a gap of about 3 feet separated her fire escape from the neighboring buildings. The connection had been a wooden plank once. Now it was just empty space and a dangerous leap. You're kidding, Ethan said. You're a billionaire. Haven't you ever done something reckless? Diane didn't wait for an answer. She backed up 3 steps and jumped. Her feet hit the neighboring fire escape with a clang that echoed through the night. She stumbled, caught herself on the railing, heart hammering. Ethan jumped a moment later, landing more smoothly. Athlete's grace and better shoes. They descended the neighboring building's fire escape, emerging in an alley 1 block over from Diane's apartment. The fire alarm still wailed behind them, a false emergency designed to drive them into the open. They're getting desperate, Ethan said as they moved through the alley. Which means we're close to something they don't want found. Eleanor's evidence is still in that restaurant, Diane said, hidden in the walls, waiting for someone to follow the coin pattern and retrieve it. We can't go back there. It's the first place they'll expect us. Then we don't go back as ourselves. Diane thought about 8 years of invisibility. 8 years of being overlooked because people saw the uniform, not the person. We go back as people they won't notice, people who belong in the background. Ethan looked at her. You have a plan. I have an idea. Whether it's a good one, Diane shrugged. We'll find out soon enough. They emerged from the alley onto a street corner where the city's night shift was changing. Restaurant workers heading home, cleaning crews starting rounds, delivery drivers making late-night runs, all the invisible people who kept Chicago functioning while everyone else slept. Diane stepped into that flow, Ethan beside her, 2 more anonymous figures in the urban night. Behind them, men searched an empty apartment. Ahead of them, the Sterling Room waited with its secrets buried in the walls. The Sterling Room opened for lunch service at 11:30. By 11:15, the morning prep crew was already inside. Line cooks prepping stations, dishwashers organizing clean plates, and the cleaning crew finishing overnight deep cleaning tasks. At 11:17, 2 members of that cleaning crew pushed through the service entrance carrying supplies. Both wore the standard gray uniforms of citywide cleaning services, the contractor the Sterling Room used for deep cleaning. Both had identification badges clipped to their shirts. Both looked tired, unremarkable, invisible. Nobody noticed that one of them was Diane Mitchell, who'd called in sick to her regular shift an hour ago. Nobody noticed that the other was Ethan Harrington, who'd spent $300 at a 24-hour costume shop and learned more about industrial cleaning in 2 hours than he'd known in his entire privileged life. They blended into the morning chaos, just 2 more anonymous workers in a world that never looked at workers twice. Kitchen first, Diane murmured, pushing a cleaning cart. We need to establish we belong here before we start searching. They moved through the kitchen, wiping down surfaces that didn't need wiping, organizing supplies that were already organized. The morning crew barely acknowledged them. Invisibility was their greatest asset. Robert Hensley arrived at 11:25, moving through the restaurant with agitated energy. His eyes swept across the cleaning crew without recognition. Why would he notice the help? Basement access is through the kitchen, Diane whispered as they worked. But they'll be watching it, expecting us to go back for the office. Eleanor said the evidence was in plain sight where invisible people work. Ethan scrubbed a already clean counter. Not the basement, somewhere public. Somewhere she could hide something and know it wouldn't be disturbed during normal operations. Diane thought about the coin pattern, triangle pointing direction, center marking location, past and present showing change over time. The quarters had pointed toward the window, toward Michigan Avenue, toward the front of the restaurant. The dining room, she said suddenly. The main dining room. That's where she worked most, where she'd have constant access without suspicion. They moved from the kitchen into the dining room, still playing their roles. Diane pulled out a feather duster, methodically working her way along the walls while Ethan followed with a cleaning cloth. The dining room looked different in morning light, less elegant, more exposed. The chandeliers were dimmed. The white tablecloths hadn't been laid yet. It was just a room, expensive, but just a room. The triangle pointed toward the window, Diane said, working near table 17. The center point. She looked around, trying to see the space the way Eleanor would have seen it 3 years ago. Air vents, Ethan said quietly, his eyes on the ceiling. Hotels hide safes behind air vents, same principle. Diane followed his gaze. 3 large air vents punctuated the dining room ceiling, arranged in a rough triangle. The center of that triangle would be. She walked to the middle of the room, directly beneath the central chandelier, looked up. The chandelier was massive, crystal and gold, probably worth more than her annual salary. But above it, barely visible, was a small access panel in the ceiling, the kind maintenance would use to access wiring or ductwork. There, she breathed. We need a ladder, Ethan said, and we need to do this without drawing attention. Robert's voice echoed from near the host stand. I want eyes on all entrances. If Harrington or the cleaner show up, I want to know immediately. Diane felt cold certainty settle in her chest. They were out of time. Maintenance closet, she said. This way. They moved quickly, still maintaining their cleaning crew personas. The maintenance closet was off the main hallway, stocked with ladders, tools, and supplies. Diane grabbed a stepladder while Ethan took a tool belt. We're doing ceiling maintenance, she said. Checking for water damage. Routine. Boring. Nobody will question it. They returned to the dining room, set up the ladder beneath the chandelier. Ethan climbed while Diane stood guard, feather duster in hand, looking every bit like she was just doing her job. Ethan reached the access panel. It was secured with 4 screws, old and painted over. He worked quickly, extracting a screwdriver from the tool belt. "How's it looking?" Diane asked, watching the kitchen doors. "Painted shut. Give me a minute." Robert emerged from the kitchen, phone pressed to his ear. He glanced at the maintenance work, at Diane standing below with her duster, and kept walking. Invisible. Just the help doing help things. The access panel came free with a soft crack of old paint. Ethan reached into the ceiling cavity, his arm disappearing into darkness. "There's something here," he said. "Feels like a package, wrapped in plastic." Diane's heart hammered. "Get it, quickly." Ethan withdrew his arm, clutching a plastic-wrapped bundle roughly the size of a shoebox. Even from the ground, Diane could see it had been secured with tape and sealed carefully against moisture and time. "Coming down," Ethan said. He descended the ladder, the package tucked under his arm. They'd done it. Eleanor's evidence, hidden for 3 years in plain sight, exactly where she'd left it. "Let's move," Diane said. But Robert had returned, this time with 2 security guards. His eyes locked onto the package under Ethan's arm, and his face went pale. "Stop them," Robert said quietly. The security guards moved forward, hands reaching for weapons that weren't quite visible but were definitely there. Diane did the only thing she could think of. She screamed, "Fire! There's smoke in the ceiling! Everyone out!" The kitchen erupted in chaos. Cooks abandoned stations. Servers rushed toward exits. The morning prep crew didn't question, didn't hesitate. They just ran. In the confusion, Diane grabbed Ethan's hand and pulled him toward the front entrance. Robert shouted orders, but his voice was drowned in the panic of a restaurant evacuation. They burst onto Michigan Avenue into the late morning Chicago bustle, business people heading to lunch, tourists photographing architecture, traffic flowing in its endless river. Diane pulled Ethan into the crowd, moving fast but not running. Running drew attention. Walking with purpose was invisible. "They'll follow," Ethan said, clutching the package. "Let them try to find 2 cleaning crew members in a city of 3 million people." Diane pulled off her gray uniform shirt, revealing a plain black t-shirt underneath. Ethan did the same. The uniforms went into a street trash can. They were just 2 more people in the crowd now. Anonymous. Free. 3 blocks from the Sterling room, Diane hailed a taxi. They collapsed into the back seat, breathing hard. "Where to?" the driver asked, disinterested. Ethan looked at Diane. She looked at the package. "Tribune Tower," Diane said. "We need to find a journalist named Sarah Chen." Sarah Chen was 53 years old, had been with the Chicago Tribune for 28 years, and had the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. When Diane and Ethan walked into her office carrying a package and Eleanor Harrington's journal, those sharp eyes went very wide indeed. "I thought you were dead," she said to Ethan. "Or that they'd scared you off like they scared off everyone else who got close to this story." "They tried," Ethan said simply. He placed the package on her desk. "Eleanor Harrington left you this. 3 years ago, she promised you evidence. Here it is." Sarah opened the package with hands that trembled slightly. Inside were 3 USB drives, each carefully labeled in Eleanor's neat handwriting. Recordings, documentation, financial records, everything Eleanor had gathered about the Sterling room's role in systemic municipal corruption. Also inside, a letter addressed to Sarah Chen. Sarah read it silently, her expression hardening with each line. When she finished, she looked at Ethan and Diane. "Eleanor wrote this the day before she disappeared. She knew they were closing in. She knew she might not survive long enough to deliver this herself." Sarah's voice was rough. "She asked me to protect the evidence, to wait until the right moment, to make sure the story couldn't be buried." "Can you publish?" Diane asked. "Will your paper run the story? With this evidence? With recordings of city councilmen and a state senator discussing bribes and contract fixing? With financial documentation showing millions in illegal transactions?" Sarah's smile was fierce. "They won't just run it. They'll run it front page for a week straight." Ethan leaned forward. "My sister. The letter. Does it say what happened to her?" Sarah's expression softened. She handed him the letter. Ethan read, his hands shaking. Diane couldn't see the words, but she saw his face crumble and rebuild itself in the space of a minute. "She ran," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "She knew they were coming. She hid the evidence, wrote the letter, and ran. Disappeared deliberately, changed her identity. She wrote that she'd stay hidden until the story broke, until it was safe to come home. She's alive?" Diane felt tears prick her eyes. "She was 3 years ago. She left contact information. A way to reach her once the story goes public. Ethan looked at Sarah. When can you publish? I need 48 hours to verify the recordings, confirm sources, get legal clearance. Then we publish Sunday edition. Front page, full investigation. Every name, every transaction, every crime. Sarah's expression was steel. Victor Castellano and everyone involved will be in handcuffs by Monday morning. 48 hours felt like 48 years. Diane and Ethan stayed in a hotel under assumed names, paid in cash, watching the news obsessively. The Sterling Room remained open for business, unaware that their entire operation was about to explode. Saturday night, Sarah Chen called. We're going to print in 3 hours. By Sunday morning, every newspaper box in Chicago will have the full story. I wanted you to know first. Thank you, Ethan said. Thank your sister, and thank Diane. Without someone who understood how invisible people see the world, we never would have found this evidence. Sarah paused. Eleanor was right about you, Diane. She wrote in her letter that whoever found the journal would be someone special, someone who noticed what others missed. She was right. When Diane hung up, she looked at Ethan. What happens now? Now we wait for morning. Then we watch everything burn down. He smiled, but it was sad. Then I try to contact my sister, bring her home. Sunday morning broke cold and clear over Chicago. The Tribune's front page headline was 5 words. The Sterling Room, Chicago's corruption kitchen. Below it, a photograph of Victor Castellano. The story ran for 8 pages. Names, dates, transactions. Recordings transcribed verbatim. Financial records showing the flow of illegal money. Everything Eleanor had died or disappeared to expose. By noon, federal investigators had raided the Sterling Room. By evening, Victor Castellano, Robert Hensley, 2 city councilmen, and a state senator were in custody. By Monday morning, the story had gone national. Diane watched it all from Ethan's penthouse apartment. He'd insisted she stay somewhere safe while the chaos unfolded. She'd protested, but he'd been right. Castellano's associates were desperate, and desperate people were dangerous. On Tuesday, Ethan's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered on speaker so Diane could hear. Ethan, a woman's voice, cautious, hopeful. Eleanor, his voice broke. You're alive. I'm alive. I saw the news. Sarah published everything. They're all in custody. Eleanor was crying. Diane could hear it. I can come home? You can come home. The journal, the coins. Someone found them. Someone smart enough to follow the pattern. Her name is Diane Mitchell. She worked at the Sterling Room. She saved your evidence. She saved everything. Ethan looked at Diane. You'd like her. She's exactly the kind of person you were hoping would find your message. Diane felt tears streaming down her own face, listening to a ghost come back to life. Thank you, Eleanor said through the phone, speaking to Diane. Thank you for looking closer. Thank you for seeing what everyone else missed. Your sister left a trail, Diane said. I just followed it. No, you did more than that. You cared enough to follow it. You risked everything to finish what I started. Eleanor's voice grew stronger. I'm coming home. I'll be there tomorrow, and I want to meet you. Properly. Not as a bus girl and a server. As equals. As partners in this. The call ended with promises of reunion, of testimony, of seeing justice done. Diane stood at Ethan's window, looking out over Chicago. The city spread before her in all directions. Millions of people living millions of invisible lives. How many of them had stories worth telling? How many of them noticed things others missed? What will you do now? Ethan asked, coming to stand beside her. I don't know. I called in sick to the Sterling Room 3 days ago. I'm pretty sure I'm fired. She laughed, surprising herself. For the first time in 8 years, I don't have a plan. I have a proposition, Ethan said carefully. Eleanor and I are starting a foundation. Investigative journalism. Supporting whistleblowers, exposing corruption. We want to fund the kind of reporting that powerful people try to silence. Sounds important. It needs someone who understands how invisible people see the world. Someone who knows what it's like to work in the shadows. Someone who notices patterns others miss. He looked at Diane directly. We'd like you to help run it, if you're interested. Diane thought about 8 years of cleaning tables, 8 years of being overlooked, 8 years of invisible labor that nobody valued. Then she thought about Eleanor's coins, arranged in a pattern meant for someone exactly like her. A message that said, I see you. You matter. Your perspective is valuable. I'm interested, she said. 3 months later, the Harrington Foundation for Investigative Truth opened its doors in downtown Chicago. Eleanor Harrington, returned from 3 years of hiding, served as director. Ethan Harrington provided the funding and business expertise. And Diane Mitchell, former bus girl, former invisible woman, former nobody, became the foundation's head of operations because she understood something the Harringtons, for all their wealth and education, never could. She understood what it meant to be invisible, and she understood that invisible people see everything. The Sterling Room closed permanently in April, its liquor license revoked, its reputation destroyed. Victor Castellano was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Robert Hensley cooperated with investigators in exchange for a reduced sentence. 2 city councilmen resigned. The state senator lost his seat. Chicago's corruption didn't end. It never does in a city with that much power and money at stake. But it became harder, more exposed, more accountable. All because one invisible woman left coins on a table, and another invisible woman looked closer. 1 year after the coins, Diane stood in the lobby of the Harrington Foundation, watching the morning rush of activity, investigators reviewing case files, journalists collaborating on exposés, legal teams preparing whistleblower protections. The entire 15th floor hummed with the energy of people dedicated to uncovering truth. Her office overlooked Michigan Avenue. Sometimes on quiet afternoons she could see the Sterling Room's former location, now a vacant storefront with a for lease sign that nobody seemed interested in filling. The building carried a reputation now, a history. You still think about it? Eleanor's voice came from the doorway. Diane turned to find Eleanor Harrington leaning against the frame, holding 2 cups of coffee. She'd changed in the year since returning, stronger, more grounded, with the quiet confidence of someone who'd survived the worst and emerged intact. Every day, Diane admitted, some mornings I wake up and expect to be pulling a double shift, cleaning tables, being invisible. Eleanor crossed the office, handing Diane one of the coffees. You were never invisible? Not really. Invisible people don't notice patterns. Don't risk everything to expose corruption. Don't save evidence that brings down criminal empires. She smiled. You were just surrounded by people who refused to see. Through the window, Chicago stretched toward the horizon. 2 million people, countless invisible workers keeping the machinery of the city running. How many of them had stories? How many had noticed things they couldn't report, injustices they couldn't fight? We got another case this morning, Eleanor said. Warehouse workers in Gary, Indiana. Wage theft, unsafe conditions, management threats. They reached out because they heard about us, about what we did with the Sterling Room. They want help. They want justice. Same as I did 3 years ago. Same as you did when you decided to look at those coins instead of just pocketing them and moving on. Eleanor's expression grew serious. The lead organizer is a night shift supervisor, woman named Maria Rodriguez. Invisible to management, but she's been documenting everything for 18 months. Diane felt that familiar pull, the recognition of someone fighting from the shadows, gathering evidence, waiting for someone to care enough to listen. When do we meet with her? Tomorrow. I thought you should lead the intake interview. You understand her world better than I ever could. The foundation had handled 43 cases in the past year. Labor violations, environmental crimes, municipal corruption. Each one brought to them by people society trained itself not to see. Janitors, warehouse workers, home health aides, delivery drivers. The invisible army that kept civilization functioning while being systematically exploited. And each case, Diane thought of those 7 coins. The triangle pointing the way, the center marking what mattered, the past and present showing that change was possible. Ethan's in conference room 3, Eleanor said. Wants to discuss expansion. There are 12 other cities requesting foundation offices. Diane nodded, but her eyes remained on the city below. Somewhere out there, people were working invisible jobs, noticing things nobody else noticed, wondering if anyone would ever care. The foundation's mission statement, written by Diane herself, hung framed on the wall. Truth lives in the margins. Justice comes from those brave enough to step out of the shadows. We see you. We hear you. Your story matters. Eleanor headed toward the door, then paused. I never properly thanked you for finishing what I started, for being exactly the person I hoped would find those coins. You left a trail, Diane said simply. I just had the courage to follow it. No, Eleanor's voice was firm. You had the courage to believe that what you saw mattered, that your observations, your instincts, your intelligence, all the things society tells invisible people don't count, actually changed everything. She smiled. That's not just courage. That's revolution. After Eleanor left, Diane returned to the window. The city gleamed in autumn sunlight, beautiful and brutal and full of secrets. Her phone buzzed. Text from Maria Rodriguez in Gary, Indiana. "Thank you for taking our case. Nobody else would listen. Nobody else cared." Diane typed back, "We care, and we're listening. See you tomorrow." She thought about 8 years of being invisible, 8 years of cleaning up other people's messes, 8 years of being overlooked, underestimated, forgotten. Then she thought about one night, one table, 7 coins arranged in a pattern, and a choice to look closer. That choice had changed everything, not just for her, not just for Eleanor and Ethan and the people they'd helped bring to justice, but for every invisible person who'd contacted the foundation since, every whistleblower who'd found courage in their story, every worker who'd realized their observations mattered. Diane picked up her coffee, savoring the expensive blend that still felt impossibly luxurious. Once she'd counted pennies for basic groceries. Now she ran a foundation with a $20 million operating budget. But the numbers didn't matter. The money didn't matter. What mattered was that invisible people were being seen. And Diane Mitchell, former busgirl, former cleaning lady, former nobody, was making sure they were heard. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm. Inside, the foundation prepared for another day of fighting for truth. And on Diane's desk, preserved under glass, 7 coins remained arranged in their original pattern. A reminder that sometimes the smallest things, overlooked, dismissed, considered worthless, held the power to change the world. You just had to look closer.